So this week then, episode 84, RevOps. There's a word to either confuse or strike fear into people's hearts. What's it all about? What's RevOps then?
So at its heart, RevOps is around efficiencies. I think RevOps is almost that systematic approach to how do we remove friction from the business.
It's as much a philosophy as it is technology.
RevOps is a way of really, do more with less or do more with the same.
It's the connecting of different departments to get rid of silos, share data, and have common purpose and goals. It's a culture.
It is a case of continued optimization. There is not a kind of we've done RevOps and there it is. This is an ongoing, how do we make it better? How do we improve it? How do we optimize it? So I've just been to HMV.
His master's voice.
Is that what it stands for?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay. Right, another fact. Factoid. It's very interesting actually. I was amazed that it still exists. I felt like I'd gone back in time.
Well, I must admit, I didn't think it did, but then I saw it appear. So what's that, a private equity firm bought a few of them out or something?
No idea.
There's a story there somewhere.
Story there, but just going through and searching through the old CDs like I used to. But what piqued my interest in it was the amount of vinyl.
Yeah, now that's, if you'd have said flick through the vinyl, I knew that was a thing. Definitely come back. You can spend a lot of money on a turntable. But CDs as well. I mean, have you even got CD players?
Well, that's what I thought. I wouldn't even know how to play this anymore.
Yeah. What is this shiny disc, Dad? It's for scaring the birds off.
But it was, I thought this is interesting, just how they've obviously diversified, and there's a lot more kind of pop, like toys, like pop culture toys, things in there and all that.
Oh, it's not just music
but it's
media.
not just, so they've gone for the whole kind of subculture type of, whatever it is, pop culture artwork.
You're in the market for a CD or
no, I wandered in, so
just fell in.
Birthday present. So ideas.
We better not say anything and give it away to the recipient.
Well, I don't think 12-year-olds listen to this. So. If he does, it's only to mock his father.
But to get vinyl, get turntable would be very on trend, very trendy present.
Could bust out my old vinyl. I've got a bit of old vinyl.
You've been vinyl, kept it. Go on.
Drum and bass.
I suspect your vinyl collection was quite different from my Fleetwood Mac.
Probably. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting that it's just there, still on the high street. Who'd have thought?
Well, good on them. There's hope for us all yet. We reinvent ourselves. Good. Well, should we do a podcast? Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast, episode 83. We're getting there, getting closer to the 100. We're publishing the podcast from Wellmodo Limited, and every week we try and come up with something interesting and useful for owners and managers of small and medium-sized enterprises, with a bit of a focus on the UK, I suppose, but this stuff kind of appeals everywhere, doesn't it? And it's Rich with me again.
Hello. Quick correction there. Correction. Jonathan Ross, that wasn't it? Oh, what a quaction. Episode 84, this one is actually.
84? Oh my goodness, I'm one out. 84, right, okay, so episode 84. We're even closer then to the 100th. I reckon if we're doing one a week though, that's still 4 months away, isn't it? Could we get it in for Christmas?
Christmas special.
100th episode, Christmas special.
Free turkey drumstick to all listeners.
We did talk about some merch as well, We better think about that a bit more seriously now. We can give it away then to our guests and to people who write in with pithy questions. Good. So what were the ones you've missed? What have you just missed? Well, you have missed episode 83 then. Get my numbers right. That was where we talked about BizDev.
The old-fashioned way, but like the vinyl version of BizDev.
What a link.
Look at that.
Oh, we could.
Look at that. I'm wasted.
That didn't happen in rehearsal, did it? We could have worked on that. So yes, the old-fashioned vinyl analog way of doing BizDev. Before all this CD stuff and HMV went out of business. That was episode 83. 82 was Pete's amazing little compilation of you and me changing shirts every 5 seconds to talk about the top 10 tips for business next year. And then episode 81 was that whole, it almost seems ages ago now, the whole CrowdStrike problem where the virus checker thing had an update and brought the world down to its knees. 5 o'clock one Friday morning. So that was actually interesting, that getting some of the background story from Pete who came in as a guest on that one. Sounds very good. So if you've just tuned in to episode 84 to listen to what this week's subject is all about, you might find something interesting in those previous 3, or even something older than
It's always worth a trip through the archives.
You've got 83 to browse through. See if there must be something in there that you'd be interested in. And
it's almost a working week's worth of
flipping heck,
content there.
That is. That's a good 40 hours worth without breaks. Back to back listening. I wonder if people listen to this as they go to bed just to help them get to sleep. Put it on the sleep timer.
That's a very scary thought.
So this week then, episode 84, RevOps.
RevOps.
There's a word to either confuse or strike fear into people's hearts. What's it all about? What's RevOps then?
What's it all about? So RevOps is the slang term for revenue operations. An abbreviation. So RevOps, revenue operations. And the underlying principle is RevOps seeks to align your marketing, sales, and customer service, customer success departments, and in fairness, even further, maybe through to the financials.
Well, I was going to say that's kind of the next step, isn't it? The finance bit.
So it's about
So it's like quote to cash.
Quote to cash. So it's probably even more than that, actually, probably because the marketings will start at awareness, promotion to cash. So it's around alignment of all of those various different departments around revenue growth. So often what will happen in a business, and I'm sure we've all seen this, is that different departments end up siloing. So marketing doesn't necessarily speak to sales doesn't speak to marketing, or customer service, or however that works. Everyone's busy doing their own thing. And this often can lead to things where you've got misalignment of goals or inefficiencies that are driven through people using different tech stacks or just different approaches to doing things, different metrics, all of that. So RevOps seeks to put a system kind of that underpins all of those different departments and functions in a way that says, right, bring consistency and systemization and alignment across the business.
Does it have to be one system? Or is it more about the fact that it's connected rather than the fact that it's one place to go to?
I think it's probably more the connection. Doesn't have to be, we're not saying put everything into HubSpot per se.
Well, sometimes that would be very difficult to do. If a company's using, let's say, SAP or Business Central for its finance world, it might have a specialist MRP system to do with all of its delivery stuff. It might then have something in sales, which maybe we're more familiar with, whether it be HubSpot, Salesforce, and it might have something different again in marketing, mightn't it, if it's still using MailChimp or SEMrush or whatever.
But I think it's more of a philosophy in a way that gets outworked practically, but that philosophy of trying to unify everything, single source of the truth, alignment to a common goal, and that has some quite fundamental potential changes to the way a business operates, and it requires a bit of thought and engineering, really.
Well, it improves the handoffs at each of those interfaces, doesn't it?
Yep.
So marketing delivers, hopefully leads to sales to convert, for them to win the work so that ops can deliver it, so that then finance can bill it. It's all those handoffs is where things get stuck or lost or misinterpreted.
Yeah. So, I mean, you might be thinking, do I need RevOps? Is it something I need in my life?
Or is it something you have anyway? You just may not have called it that.
Not called it that. But some of the common things that you might hear that might trigger a discussion around RevOps might be things like none of our processes seem to work, or we haven't got the data in the right place. We can't make data-driven decisions around here because nobody fills in the right bit of the system, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, your piece of data on this is different from my piece of data on this. Which one is correct?
So all the data's all over the place, or inconsistent data, or incomplete data, all that type of thing. So those are sorts of common things that people will symptoms of a potential need to have a look at RevOps
as a philosophy, like you say. So this isn't about necessarily finding a piece of software or a system to solve this. No, it's the thinking that underpins it.
There isn't a kind of RevOps.com software that you can. I mean, there are people that do. I'm attacked by a fly here. I know. I'm almost being attacked. But yeah, ignore that. trying to do a serious podcast and ring a tech by a fly. Yeah, so at its heart, RevOps is around efficiencies. So clearly having a lot of silos in the business where people aren't communicating and talking to each other can drive inefficiencies in terms of just how you do business. So RevOps looks at trying to break all that down.
So stop double entering of data, mistakes caused by people going off in different directions, or delivering bits of work that actually haven't been sold, or even worse, not delivering a piece of work that has been sold, and all that stuff.
Things like that. Getting alignment across everybody, which is another one of those kind of management-y words that can mean everything and nothing. It's like the new strategy. If you put strategy on the end of everything, it kind of makes it important, apparently. But alignment, yeah. So, and again, this could maybe touch on vision for the business as well. How easier to get everyone aligned if you've got a common direction of travel. Things like data integration, so making sure that you've got the right data in the right places, that you can actually make informed choices off that.
So this impacts dashboard designs and all that, trying to get that full view of a company, a bit like our accounts viewer, graphical P&L thing that we talked about before.
And I think with this as well, like having some common terminology around what the metrics are. So rather than marketing having its set of metrics and sales having its set of metrics, etc., actually having an agreed set of metrics that make sense for the business in terms of growth. Again, we've talked about vanity metrics quite a lot on this podcast. It's not vanity metrics. It's things that actually, push the business growth forward. And then also having a look at, what's the underlying technology stack that all of this sits in. So all of this has got to come through some form of CRM or some central point where all that data can be collected.
Yeah, maybe
and manipulated.
We talked about tech stacks, didn't we, back in an earlier episode? I think 62, I think was the episode for that, for looking at all the different things. And like we said just now, it doesn't have to be necessarily one technical solution that solves all of this problem, but you want as few as possible, and those that you've got have to be pretty well integrated. So it's all one piece of data.
And I think having that mapped out so everybody knows what every bit of software is actually there to do. And I think that was part of the challenge in episode 62, where we talked about what is your tech stack. Do you even know what your tech stack is?
Yeah. Well, there's zombie solutions out there.
Zombies, and making sure part of a RevOps department or someone who's looking after it, or just a philosophy would be, have we got the right bit of tech for the right solution?
See, now you mentioned something there, which I think might be an alien concept to lots of people, even if they've understood RevOps as a philosophy. The thought that it might be a department, or that there might be someone in charge of RevOps in particular, rather than a marketing head or a sales head or whatever. Is this what you'd imagine a chief revenue officer to be looking after, or is that something else?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the role of chief revenue officer would be doing that. Probably you've got to think about size of company here. Some research or stats that I've read have shown that you should be looking at, for every 10 people on the team, you should be looking at one person for enablement. So if you've got a sales team of 10, then you might have one person who's looking at the data, doing the data analysis and all of that. So once you start to build that RevOps team out, you would...
A lot of our audience that would be smaller teams than that, you've got to have a part of everybody's job, or maybe someone part-time doing some of the data analysis and the enablement stuff, worrying about systems and housekeeping and data hygiene and that type of thing.
And I think a lot of this really comes down to, I think the philosophy of it is important. People have got to buy into it. Mm-hmm. And it's a cultural thing as well, that we're all going to work on this together and pull in the same direction, which can be difficult to overcome in some places.
Depending on the history, where they come from, yeah.
And all of that. But yeah, so the core of it really is like drive efficiencies, get alignment, get all your data in one place, and then have a kind of tech stack that's understood by everybody, used by everybody, and that is controlled in a way that people aren't just going off left, right, and center and adding in new bits to a system. So there's an element of all of that.
Okay, so when we're thinking about that's kind of the core of what it does, what's it made up of then? If we're talking about the core components that go together to build that up, it sounds like it's a processy sort of thing, isn't it? Trying to think about the process of something from its beginning, that promotion stuff, even before quote, right through to cash.
So it's going to start. Well, this is interesting. So a lot of people say, okay, with that process, you'll start with marketing, because clearly you've got to, raise awareness of whatever it is you're doing. Once marketing have done their job, it will push forward into sales. Once sales have done their job, it pushes forward into, delivery or ops or customer service and then finance. And that's when you can get those. So you can have a very good process there, but it can be quite siloed in terms of how that all works. Yeah. I think with RevOps, it's very much looking at the role of marketing really does underpin sales and customer service. So it's very much a both and rather than either or type of approach, but to keep it simple. And sales are working much more hand in glove with marketing to identify opportunities much maybe earlier in the life cycle.
Well, and giving feedback where leads coming through are supposedly as marketing qualified leads aren't converting, so they can get that feedback loop to refine that for the next round.
So I think the process is much more, marketing really does support sales and customer service all the way through. So from the customer service point of view, maybe the order's been won, but marketing are now looking at what are the opportunities for cross-sell, upsell, on-sell, all that kind of other stuff.
We mentioned that, and I've seen some places talk about marketing being where some of this resides, because it doesn't have to reside in any existing department. But if you're a smaller organisation, then I guess marketing could have the role of bringing all this together, just because it's first in the chain, isn't it? So it gets to see the life cycle of that data from when it was born right through to when it gets billed and cash collected.
Yeah, and I think we talked in the previous episode as well about the whole kind of market intelligence, and there's a part of that is involved in market research and actually getting the data. That first bit of data normally that comes into a CRM will be marketing skewed because it's typically new leads, that type of thing. So that's the point at which you can start to think about, okay, well, what do we actually need in here for ICPs, or how do we funnel these leads through sales and
customer profiles for those who missed the episode
and those sorts of things. So it's about, it is a process, but it's not a siloed process. It's a kind of, how do we really make sure we've got those handshakes agreed, and
at its very fundamental level, even some obviously almost too obvious basic stuff. Make sure we're all using the same reference numbers to describe a job. Whatever, if we have a sales order, for example, how do we link that across to the quote that led to it? And how do we lead that onto the job number or the purchase order that gets linked with it? How does all this get connected? And if we've agreed to sell 10 units of something or 5 hours of something or whatever it may be, where does that data live in each of the stages of the system rather than lots of different systems? So if marketing thinks we've got a promotion on selling a bundle of 10 hours or something, or 10 widgets in a box, and then sales go and sell a 12 off just because whatever reason, how do ops know that? And how do we make sure that the right amount is billed and that we don't short deliver or over deliver or whatever? So there's a lot of really fundamental stuff that people will think is obvious in there, but by having siloed systems, it relies on manual intervention to check all these things align. And it's trying to get rid of that.
Get rid of the friction, isn't it? So there's that. I mean, a very small example of that, I suppose, is things, and it's kind of, I suppose, slightly aligned to RevOps, but our use of Slack internally has meant that we've cut out a lot of the friction around emails. And it's just, I think RevOps is almost that systematic approach to how do we remove friction from the business, so that not only does it run efficiently from the point of view of internal operations, whatever that may be, but also ultimately it provides a much better customer experience. Yeah, sure. Because everybody's, if you could free up 10, 20% of everybody's time just by having better systems, better data, and actually better comms, you could put that into doing, more of the value-added stuff. So
I suppose you could even get it that when a deal goes to the closed stage, it sets up a Slack channel, if you're using Slack as your communications thing, or Teams if you're into that world instead, so that then any chat from then on that goes against that subject for internal consumption goes against the Slack channel. Similarly, you could use the service or the customer success elements of your CRM to deal with any customer-facing chat, or you could just make sure that emails are linked or whatever. But you've got to think about how do each of the departments have visibility of, even if it's read-only, view-only, so that you can see the journey that a customer has taken. Yeah. So if you just pick them up when your bit comes to play, with complete ignorance of what's done before, you're putting quite a burden on the customer to re-explain themselves or to correct you. And or maybe even something that will never get said, but a nuance that was picked up during even the marketing interaction before sales got involved, or certainly during sales, which actually ops would find really useful to know. That a customer has a preference for this or an aversion to that, which may not be part of the purchase order. Why would it be? It's a nuance, isn't it? But that's where you're trying to link all this up much more connectedly.
Connectedly, absolutely. Connectedly. So key components, you've got to get the processes right and make sure that everybody's aligned along those processes and they're mapped out and defined. You've got the right sort of data, so you've got single source of the truth, which again is the kind of nirvana for every business.
And even if there's a sort of close relation to single source of the truth, that if you do have multiple places that data is kept, there's still only a single source, even if it's in different databases. But you have, I'm not sure if we can say master slave anymore, but that's the whole point, isn't it? That you've got one parent child, the origination of the data, and that's the gospel, if you like, and then everything else is a copy of that. You can't change the copies, you can only change the original piece of data.
And then from a technology point of view, making sure that you've got the right systems in, the right automations, the right, and again, that's another, piece of work. And I think the people side of it as well, because you're going to be really trying to foster more collaboration across departments. There is a culture piece on that. And depending on where your business is, that could be harder or easier. But really, I think you've got to have some support from the board or someone on the board who's going to champion this, because it really does take a bit of driving home.
Well, especially where some of the work that one of those departments in the chain has to do is not directly just for the benefit of themselves, but it's to make something work better downstream. So if you're asking, for example, salespeople to go to a lot more detail of what needs to be delivered and how and when and all that sort of thing as part of the sales process, they don't need that to close the deal. And salespeople are measured and rewarded on just closing the deal, not on how effectively they communicate to the ops people or the customer success people downstream, how well it's eventually getting delivered. And that's something where you do need that overarching leader, if you like, to help explain why that's the case.
So then, for example, you could look at something like if people were incentivized around lifetime value of a customer, then actually from sales point of view, it makes sense to really help the customer service or the ops team deliver grade A customer service, product delivery, all that type of thing, because the likelihood then of repeat purchase is greater, et cetera, and it's aligned to revenue then, rather than just how many deals have you closed.
But that's quite countercultural, isn't it? Lots of sales teams in particular, and marketing in their own way, they've all got their own measures that they're familiar with. To come up now with measures that rely on other people downstream, that is a countercultural change. So we need that leadership to drive that change in.
And that's where I think it does need that board element to it. So I suppose you could say, why is it important? Why should businesses be interested in this?
Yeah, I'm putting myself here in the position of someone listening to this thinking, that's all very well and good. I think we've got sort of the components of that, but we just don't call it that. And we've got different systems, but we're not that daft and not that, but we sort of talk to each other. Where would you get the driver to really make this a subject in its own right and bring it in?
I think this really comes in when you are looking at scaling. I mean, I think if you're a business that doesn't want to scale, and they do exist, and there's various reasons why you might want to stay at the 1 million or 5 million or whatever million, wherever you're at, lifestyle business, etc. That's fine. I think there's still, I suppose, some scope there to drive efficiencies and those sorts of things. But I think particularly for businesses that are looking to scale, this really gives you a framework to systemize.
Well, just to kick on that for a minute, because you prompted a thought. When I've met companies that have got a different view about growth, like you were saying there, is it a lifestyle business or whatever? I think often the constraint that's described as is in terms of number of people involved rather than revenue pounds. So actually, if you say, look, I've got comfortable at a 10-person firm or a 30-person firm, we all know each other, we trust each other, we spend a long time getting here. We don't want to now move offices to somewhere bigger or change fundamentally the bit. I get that. But actually, if you could get more revenue through with the same team, then most people wouldn't be averse to growth then, would they? So if what we're saying, the benefit of having a good RevOps process does allow you to grow, but efficiently, so you can do more with the same, if not more with less, then I don't think then many people would say, no, I don't want to grow even if I could do that. I think most people on those terms would say, yeah, fine, if you're going to give me more for the same, I go for that.
Well, I think as well, maybe looking at where we are with the current UK labour market, how hard it is to recruit, particularly like quality people, that ability to do more with the same is becoming a stronger driver. And I think RevOps gives you that framework to be able to really think about, well, how do we organise all of this? How do we make sure that we're absolutely getting bang for a buck as we go through each phase of for each department of the business, but also how do we also really drive that customer experience? Because regardless of whether it's B2B, B2C, people's expectations now around the experience they get when they...
Yeah, you can imagine a customer saying, I've told you this, when they're talking to some agent from the company. What they mean is not that I've told you personally, Dave's spoken to Richard, I've told your organisation this. And it may be 6 months ago when we agreed this and the other, you knew that, you as a body corporate. Yeah. Well, how does that nugget of information get passed to the actual individual human that you're talking to?
Yeah, and the assumption is that once I've told your organisation something,
you know it. It's in your systems somehow.
Yeah, so
you read it yourself if you ring up complaining about something. That must be. Have you not got it in your record somewhere that I, complained about this or had one of these fitted or did that thing, and let me have a look at your records. Oh yeah, I'll find it here. So it's that connectedness of all of that stuff, isn't it?
And I think a lot of B2C brands do this quite well, partly because I suppose the onus is there's maybe more customers for B2C. If you think about, clothing brands or, whatever you're buying online type of thing, that whole process now has to be so seamless. And so it'd be hard to compete online if you had really poor customer service and you really weren't, have all of that information in one place. And I think that a bit like we've talked about this before on the podcast as well, that if your technology that you're using at home is better than the technology you're using at work, there's a real disconnect there in terms of, this isn't working for me. I think we've become so accustomed now we expect very high customer service from every interaction that bleeds into the B2B world. Why should that be different?
We've got high expectations, haven't we? And we start to feed off our experiences as customers when we're now in the workplace.
So I think, again, RevOps is a way of really, do more with less or do more with the same. Drive those efficiencies, but also at the same time, how do you really design and engineer a really good customer experience? Because you're really looking at the revenue lifetime value. Still being attacked by this. You're looking at the lifetime value of the customer client in terms of maximizing revenue, not just today, but tomorrow.
I think there's an adjunct as well to the point you made about scaling and the fact that a better system with all this data flowing seamlessly with single source of the truth. I think another, and maybe a close cousin of that, is resilience. So if in any organization you've got some degree of employee churn, which is inevitable, certainly as the team size gets larger, then I think we're seeing it already anyway, played out over a longer timescale, but the average length of tenure is coming down. So people will now regard it as acceptable to be in a job for maybe 18 months, whereas in the past 2 years, 3 years might have been regarded as a minimum. People are moving on more quickly, which means that even if you're not growing as a business, you're having to get a lot more different people able to operate the same system, but flawlessly and seamlessly from a customer's point of view.
The McDonald's experience, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you were starting out from scratch, then how would you start? How would you implement that?
I start by mapping out the customer journey. Okay. If you want more, we talked about that episode 5, way back. So if you want to really some vintage SME podcast when we were, but mere exactly. We were rookies in the game of podcasting. But no, start out, really map out what is the customer journey. Also, as part of that, you'd be probably layering different, what bits of technology do we use at each customer stage of the customer journey? What's the customer expecting? What data do we need to connect? What do those handovers look like? That type of thing. Then maybe look at kind of aligning kind of metrics and goals. So we talked a lot about before, probably marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads. What is the definition of a sales qualified lead? So marketing and sales work together on that to say, right, we think that when a lead we've identified these different data points, or maybe using lead scoring. A lot of people use that in HubSpot. So to quantify, when it hits 25 points or whatever, we've worked out that means that, or when they've done this behavior, that means that they're ready for sales. So really getting alignment on where all that works. And also looking at things, looking at what is rather than looking at the vanity metrics again, what is the cost of customer acquisition, marginal cost of customer acquisition, customer lifetime value, those kind of real, more weighty numbers that really show the revenue side of things rather than just how many views have we had and how many clicks and all that type of thing. So it's much more grounded in the financials of the business, really. Again, have a look at your tech stack, technology stack. What are you using at each stage of the process, and look at how you could, if you write that down, can you rationalize it? I mean, we're doing quite a big exercise at the moment of really rationalizing what we're using. I think it's one of those things that does just creep over time, and you've almost got to...
It's easier to add them on than to take them off, isn't it? So you end up growing.
And particularly, I think the type of organization that really would embrace RevOps is also going to be the likelihood of, let's drive innovation, let's find new tools, let's find new things, which is all good. And it's not to discourage that, but do it in a controlled way. A bit like we talked about in episode 62 on managing tech stack. Do it in a controlled way and make sure you don't end up with all these different systems and all these different places. And
we're doing an integration work at the moment, aren't we, for a machining company, where they definitely have to have a different system for the delivery and the monitoring of delivery dates and so on, because it's a very complicated production environment. But we've integrated that to HubSpot, so we can have automatic emails, automatic reporting, all using exactly the same data. It still applies the single source of the truth philosophies, but that data is kept in different places for different bits of data are kept in different places, but they're synced to one another. So now we know, for example, in the sales department and really right back to marketing, which of the jobs that have been delivered are running on time, which ones might be late, which ones tend to run into problems or not. So it's that connecting it up, even if it's not all under one roof.
Yeah. So map out the customer journey, get the goals and things aligned, look at the technology. And then I think probably one of the most important bits is around that collaboration piece. You've got to make sure that everybody in the business is aligned and wanting to, maybe not wanting to, but bought into the process of doing it so they can see the greater good. Often this, I think, would help if you've got a strong vision in the business anyway. So we're really trying to get to this destination, everybody.
Well, especially if those departments come together in somebody responsible, a leader across these areas, whether it be the chief revenue officer or something else, an ops director, general manager or something, but someone who can sit with their organization beneath them that covers everything from the promotion and quoting and sales right through to operations and finance.
And I think just that cross-departmental fertilization. So does sales sit in on a marketing meeting? Does marketing sit in on the sales meetings? Are we hearing what each other's doing? Are we talking to each other? Are we actually building those relationships so that it just takes the friction out of when you try and implement something like this? It's not saying it's easy, but it's easier. I think then once you've got something like this, it is a case of continued optimization. There is not a kind of we've done RevOps and there it is. This is an ongoing, how do we make it better? How do we improve it? How do we optimize it? We thought this would work, but it hasn't worked so well. What if we did something different? All those sorts of things. So it's an ongoing journey, but one that I think continues to be, my nemesis of a fly in there. But yeah, so
watching on the video, Rich has spent this entire podcast wafting his hand around his head, trying to persuade a fly to buzz off. So that's RevOps then. So quick summary, RevOps stands for revenue operations. Yep. It's as much a philosophy as it is technology. It's the connecting of different departments to get rid of silos, share data, and have common purpose and goals. It's a culture. Yep. And if it is going to be embodied into different technical systems, then you've got to make sure that you've thought about your tech stack and you've integrated them properly. Yep. And then you continuously improve to improve the customer experience and drive scalability and resilience. There you go. That's if I was ChatGPT, I would have just spurted that out. Yeah. We did it longhand. Good, excellent. Thanks for that, Rich. Good summary. That's something you're ending up talking to an awful lot of customers and prospects about at the moment, the whole idea of RevOps. Yeah, more so than just one of those bits in isolation, how it all connects together. Brilliant. Well, that's been another episode from the SME Growth Podcast, episode 84, as I was corrected at the beginning. So getting closer, 16 to go to our century. Thanks again for listening. Please tell your friends and business colleagues that we're here. Point them to our stuff. And don't forget, there's 84 episodes now. I'm sure you can find something in that lot that might be interesting to either you or them. Thanks a lot for listening and good luck with your business.